Hello again, students. We're going to continue our examination of topic 6. We've already looked at the Great Depression, some of the things that led to the Depression, as well as the effects on the American people. And today we're going to look at the New Deal. And the New Deal is the blanket term for a series of programs and legislation backed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt as a way of addressing the problems from the Great Depression and trying to bring America out of it. It's probably not surprising that Herbert Hoover lost his bid for re-election in 1932 by a wide margin. He will lose it to the man we see here. This is Franklin Delano Roosevelt, oftentimes referred to as FDR. Hoover still kind of pushed for localism and volunteerism and minimal response from the federal government to the Great Depression, whereas Roosevelt won largely on his willingness to use the federal government. He believed in a very big, robust response from the federal government, and he said that will provide a new deal for the American people, which is where the term for the programs came from. But it also, you can see some similarities with Theodore Roosevelt's Square Deal from several decades before. When Roosevelt takes office, one of the first things he's going to do is to declare a bank holiday to stop all those runs on the banks, where they basically shut down the banks for a few days. And then he goes on the air to reassure the American people. Roosevelt, of all presidents, is one of the first to really catch on to how powerful a medium radio is. And this reassurance that he gives to the American people through these speeches, where he speaks almost directly to them, comes to be known as fireside chats. And he will do this throughout both the Great Depression and World War II. From the White House, you can see they made a little makeshift studio for him to work from, where he will, try to calm the American people and to explain what is going on, what their government is doing to address the problems. And it goes a long way to trying to sort of bring down a lot of the panic that was going on there. Roosevelt is going to follow sort of Keynesian economics, the idea of pump priming, that the federal government needs to put money back into the economy when you have an economic downturn like this, usually by hiring people. And it's sort of a bottom-up approach to economics, that if you put more money back into the working class, they will start buying more stuff, and then buying more stuff will open back up some of these factories and other areas and return the recovery, sort of spinning that downward spiral we saw of unemployment back the other direction. The New Deal programs are going to have 3 primary goals: relief, recovery, and reform. Relief is dealing with the immediate problem. You've got a lot of unemployed people. You've got farmers losing their farms. You've got banks that are collapsing. You need to stop that problem. You need to address this issue right now, right? Those are relief programs, providing immediate relief. Recovery programs are trying to bring the economy back to where it was prior to the Great Depression. So you need to get the banking system working again. You need to get people employed once more, get them back on their feet, get us back to where we were before all of this occurred. And then lastly, reform programs are looking more long term. How do we structure our economic system? How do we change the relationship of the government and business and people so that we don't have another Great Depression in the future? The first 100 days of Roosevelt's presidency are a flurry of activities with new programs and laws being put into place very, very quickly. And as you can see from this political cartoon, Roosevelt was very willing to kind of try anything, right? You weren't sure what exactly was going to work, so you threw it at the wall and see what sticks. If it doesn't work, you get rid of it and you try something different. And the American people were very happy to see their government doing something, right? Even if it wasn't perfect, they were happy to see that the government was addressing the problem. Roosevelt will one of the first things they need to do is address the financial system and the collapsing of the banks. And this is where we get FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which insures money that is kept in the bank. So if a bank fails, the federal government takes money out of the FDIC fund and gives it to the depositors whose money was still in the bank. And this reassures people that the banks are a safe place to keep their money and prevents runs on the bank, or at least major runs on banks in the future for the most part. They also create the Securities and Exchange Commission to set rules on stock trading and to help try and stabilize the market, to get people feeling safe investing their money in the stock market once again. For the farmers, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, or the AAA, is going to start paying subsidies to farmers to not produce crops. They're actually going to pay them to leave some of their fields fallow, to not plant anything there. And the reason is that overproduction, that glut in the market, that surplus of crops, is what leads to the crop prices dropping. But farmers, if they don't produce more crops, don't get enough money. So now the government actually will pay them to not plant, to keep the supply down. And the rural areas of the country are some of the poorest areas. So trying to look long term here, FDR is going to try to bring them a little bit more back up to speed. The Tennessee Valley Authority will build dams along the Tennessee River to provide flood control in this area, but also provide electric power to this. And then later on, with the second New Deal, we'll see the REA, the Rural Electrification Authority Administration, that will give loans and pay to run electrical power lines to more remote areas, because of course our power grid is controlled mostly by private corporations, and it wasn't cost effective. They weren't going to make a good profit running electrical power out to farmhouses, much like you'll still find areas where you can't get internet in America because it costs the companies more money than it's worth to run lines out there. So here the government is going to run those lines out there for them. And in the case of the TVA, they're actually running a power company. And this is going to attract some businesses with the cheap power, because the government doesn't need to turn a profit, it just needs to break even. Putting people back to work, there'll be several programs to do this. One we can see here with the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC. They hire over 2 million young men, mostly to replant forests, dig irrigation ditches, build some trails, and to fight forest fires. And this is largely, in more of the wild areas, but that also has ties with conservation as well. We will also see the PWA and the WPA. The Public Works Administration is the one that comes first. The PWA, it's going to hire millions of workers to improve infrastructure, building bridges, dams, power stations, government buildings, and the like. There are a lot of PWA-built buildings that are still in existence. There's one next to Ice Cream Larry's. I think it might be actually a WPA building. And a lot of the buildings at the Toledo Zoo were built at this time using government money. And the idea was to get people back to work, to start hiring people so that they started working again, and that would put money back into the economy. That would accomplish that pump priming that Keynes and Roosevelt wanted to see happen. But in addition to this, we're kind of hitting two birds with one stone, because these are projects that needed to be done. We needed to replant some of our forests. We needed to create some irrigation in places like, the southern Great Plains. We needed to fix up our roads and build new bridges and stuff to accommodate all of the increased traffic. The centerpiece of these first 100 days programs of the first New Deal was the NRA, the National Recovery Administration, and it will work with business and labor leaders to develop codes for fair competition and set relationships with the government, the businesses, and labor unions. To help out the workers, it would set minimum wages to bring up their income, and to help out businesses, it would set minimum prices so that when they sold their products, they could make money. And the idea was that these two things would be commensurate, and as workers made more, they could afford to pay more, and that's going to help out the businesses as well. The New Deal will do even more to help labor beyond that. The National Labor Relations Act, better known as the Wagner Act, recognized the right, for the first time, the federal government recognized the right of workers to form unions and to collectively bargain. And this will create the National Labor Relations Board, which kind of handles complaints and stuff between businesses and labor unions. And they also set in the second New Deal the Fair Labor Standards Act, which established a minimum wage of 25 cents an hour in 1938 and a maximum work week of 44 hours. And for the first time, the federal government outlaws child labor everywhere. The WPA, the Works Progress Administration, will replace the PWA. There's actually some back and forth with Roosevelt in the Supreme Court as to the constitutionality of these programs. And some of the criticisms of the New Deal is what we'll get into in the next lesson, so we'll save that for later. But they will employ over 8 million people to do a lot of the same things that the PWA does. In addition, they hire a lot of artists and scholars and journalists to go back to work. And you'll still see in many places murals like the one on your screen that were painted by WPA artists. There is a wealth of recordings of firsthand accounts of life as an enslaved person that was done by the WPA during this time. It was a way to hire people to go down into the South and to interview these people, some of the last living slaves or people who had been enslaved. This is where we get a lot of their firsthand accounts. A lot of the photographs that I've used in previous ones were taken by WPA hired photographers like Dorothy Lang. In one of the longest terms and most popular of the New Deal programs, this comes out of the second New Deal as well, is the Social Security Administration. And this is going to create a pension system, a government-run pension system for retirees. It also creates unemployment insurance, aid to poor mothers and children at first. And this is all going to be funded by a payroll tax. So the people currently working are paying into Social Security that is being collected by the people who are currently retired. So when I pay into Social Security, that's not the money I'm going to collect. It's the money my parents are currently collecting because they are retired, right? So it's the idea of the second New Deal, and the Social Security Administration really emphasizes this, was that it was the government's job to promote the general welfare and to protect its citizens. And it wasn't just, militarily protecting them, but protecting them financially and making them secure, which is what the Social Security Act and others like it were designed to do. One of the other things that Social Security Act does is it makes it possible for more people to retire in the 1930s, which got a lot of them out of the workforce. That decreases some of that competition for jobs because you had older people who probably should have retired, but because they lost so much in the Great Depression, were continuing to work and taking up jobs. And so this was one way to also kind of help get them out of the workforce. All right, looking at your graphic organizer for this one, you've got at the top here the 3 goals of the New Deal. Make sure you define what each of those goals meant. Then we've got a series of New Deal programs on the left-hand side here. For each of them, many of them are acronyms. Tell me what that name stands for. What does the acronym stand for? Tell me what that program does. And then the goal. Which of the 3 goals do you think this program was designed to accomplish? Is this a relief, recovery, or reform? And then your rationale as to why you would support that side, why you think it is that. These could fit into several different categories, so don't be afraid if you think it fits in one. Just pick one and tell me why you think it's more that one. So for example, the FDIC, the government insures your deposits. This is a recovery program because it helps the banks get back on their feet and gives people confidence in their banks again. You might call it reform, but I called it recovery. All right.